Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being with us on this Facebook Live event tonight. It will take a few minutes for everyone to get logged in, so we're going to start in just a minute or two.
For those of you who are just joining, we have these brochures that were forwarded in the invitation to this evening's event. It's a link, and if you will go back to your invitation, you can press on that link and see the brochure that we'll be discussing this evening.
Okay, with us tonight, we've got myself, Dan Walters, the president of the San Francisco Bay Area Council. We've got Ken Melhorn, our scout executive for at least the next few days. And we also have Tricia Shepard and Jason Lewis here trying to make sure that all this comes off properly. So happy to have them. I did want to share, even though we are in the same room, we are practicing our 6-foot social distance. So we've been using this in my plant to tell people if they're too close. And we're going to try and respect that 6-foot distance tonight. Also joining us via the Facebook Live feed, although you won't hear from them directly, are our Council Commissioner Calvin Masuda and the President of the Mount Diablo Silverado Council, Tom Weibert. We expect to have a number of other guests on board, but we won't be able to introduce everyone, unfortunately. Jason, does it look like we've got a good feed?
We're at 38 people.
Okay, good. So we've got a few people on board. We're going to go ahead and get started. Our goal tonight is to give you some background on a contemplated merger of 3 councils: the Alameda Council, the Mount Diablo Silverado Council, and the San Francisco Bay Area Council into a single council. We're doing that for strategic reasons, the details of which we're going to talk about through the course of this event. And we'll be also talking about this document, which is available through a link on your Facebook page, the same one that you got to this event with, but also in emails that you may have received earlier, and the Scouter Weekly as well.
Dan, before you go on, let me add also that this evening, if you have questions or comments that you'd like to make as they come up, be sure to use the chat feature of your Facebook page. Send those through. We have a moderator who will make sure that the questions are not duplicating others or the comments are not duplicating others. And Dan or I will try our best to respond to those questions as they come in.
Thank you. So let's just jump right into it. What are we talking about? The merger between Mount Diablo Silverado Council and San Francisco Bay Area, many of you will remember, was contemplated back in 2011-2012. During that period, the 2 councils did a very, very deep and detailed analysis of what a joint council might look like, really got into a lot of the nitty-gritty of how to run a merged council. Unfortunately, you may also recall that while San Francisco voted for the merger overwhelmingly, 99+%, Mount Diablo vote did fail. They did not have a majority of their voting members who approved it. And so you have a sense of what we mean by voting members. Those are the board members of the council, the executive committee members, all of the charter organization representatives, the CORs, as well as members at large of the board and our national representatives. So it's a fairly big group that represents various parts of the organization at the council level and down into representing the units. Now, when we did that work several years ago and it failed, we continue to maintain conversations with the folks at Mount Diablo on a very informal basis. And just made sure that nothing big was changing in either of the councils, and that we would look for the right time to revisit a merger. One of the triggers that we had talked about has happened, and that was Ken Mellhorn, our scout executive, announced his retirement. So the need to refill that position made it an appropriate time for us to consider the merger. The process started in earnest really just over a month ago. We formed a merger committee made up of members of our council, 5 members of our council, and 5 members of the Mount Diablo Council. We got together to ask, what do we need to know in order to recommend a merger? We quickly realized that really what we need to know is, does this make strategic sense? On the macro level, can the 2 councils coming together better serve the youth of our service area than one council and another council, each doing their own activities? And the group very quickly decided, yes, there is strategic underpinning and no fatal flaws. We went over finance and a few other things to make sure there were no fatal flaws, and proceeded to develop a little more detail behind how a merger would work. Shortly after that, each of the 2 council executive committees met and authorized the merger committee to advance the process in earnest, and to invite the Alameda Council to consider joining us. Alameda Council then quickly went through their processes and working with their voting members and their volunteers to decide the same thing. Did it make strategic sense? And they decided that indeed it does. In fact, they're a bit ahead of us in the curve in that they've already held a very successful town hall meeting with their stakeholders to discuss how it might work for the youth in the Alameda Council. We've done a little bit of background work, and then we met as a joint executive committee. So we brought the executive committees of all 3 councils together, talked about the merger, what it might look like, and then split and voted to recommend it to the voting members of each council. So that has already been done. That's where we are today. If you look at the...
Dan, I should emphasize to the listeners as well that no decision has been made to merge at this point. We're not merged, even though the executive committees of all 3 of these councils have recommended that we pursue that course of action. Essentially, the resolution that they approved is to bring the notion of merging to our voting members, those groups of people that Dan referred to earlier. It's that group that will ultimately decide whether a merger takes place.
Thank you. That is absolutely correct. Nothing has been put together yet that binds us. If you look at this, one of the first things you'll notice on the front page is it talks about the Golden Gate Area Council. Golden Gate Area Council. Well, when we did this work back in 2011, 2012, and did the deep dive, one of the things that was done is a very, very thorough review of names, the pros, the cons, the availabilities, trademark protection, and the recommendation from that group was Golden Gate Area Council. And the merger committee looked at that and said, well, they know more than we're going to ever learn again. It was a very thorough study, and so like so many things, we were able to rely on the work that was done then. If you open up, you'll see a couple of things that I want to point to a few of them in particular. You'll notice in the middle there's a map, and it shows a green area which would be the geography for the new council boundaries. So going from the southern border of Alameda County, which is our border as well as a council, on up through Contra Costa, Solano, Napa, and Lake. So it gets pretty big as far as physical footprint. But one of the first things that you'll notice from a strategic point of view is where the camps are located. We've got Wente Scout Reservation, premier camp up in the alpine kind of setting along the inner coast. We've got Royane, which is a great redwood camp. If you keep going on down, you'll see that Mount Diablo will bring in Camp Herms, which is a wonderful urban camp up in the El Cerrito Hills. Great place, close, able to do a lot of unique training and unit functions. Down in southeast Alameda County, we have Rancho Las Mochos, which is our Manzanita low desert sort of camp experience, close enough for units to use on a regular basis. And in fact, in terms of camper nights, that is the most used camp in our council. More camper nights there than at Wente or Royane. And then off the chart over to the east is Camp Wolfboro, which is a High Sierra camp on National Forest Service land that offers a completely different Sierra mountain and trail and high adventure opportunity for our scouts. You'll also notice that we have 3 offices. We've got the YLTC, we all know. Mount Diablo has an office in Pleasant Hill, up near Concord, and then Alameda has an office in Alameda. The intent is to maintain all of those facilities until it doesn't make sense. There has been no look at selling a property or selling a council office. At this point, we'll operate all 3 should the group merge. I don't think that would last forever, but again, those sorts of decisions we're going to leave until after we merge. And the real advantage of that, the thing that we all were able to really feel good about in the merger committee process is once we go through the merger, we'll start making decisions based on what's good for us, meaning Golden Gate Area Council. We won't be thinking about, well, how is that going to impact San Francisco Council or Mount Diablo Council or Alameda Council. We'll be making decisions truly as a unified group. And that will drive us over the next year or two into making decisions that range from going from 3 camping committees to 1. We need 3 camping committees for the next 3, 5, 6 months at least, right? Because we all have summer camp coming, we've got other programs happening, we need to make sure those are executed well. The volunteers then will drive the merging of those activities when it makes sense to the volunteers who are closest to it. And we'll begin to form into a single council in terms of activities. So,
you know, Dan, earlier in your presentation, you mentioned the fact that this merger opportunity with these 3 councils is all about synergies as we can affect a better program, a more feasible program, a more economical program for our young people. And you're outlining just a moment ago of the several properties that these councils will bring to the table. To me, youngsters growing up through our program, our Golden Gate Area Council program, they will never need to go to another council's camp. They can continue to camp every year of their scouting career in our council. They'll have a mountainous area, Wolfboro, as you mentioned, a Redwood Coastal Camp, Wente Scout Reservation, and an inner city Camp Herms would be wonderful, particularly for the group that we have in our council, Scout Reach and Outreach. So that's one of those many advantages that the merger committee found and saw related to the combination of these 3 councils.
thank you. And so, again, I want to emphasize.
I do have a question.
Okay, we have a question now.
Jennifer Dent is asking, do the Alameda and Mount Diablo Silverado councils have any open or pending abuse claims and or litigation?
They do not. We all have potential. We have known abuse claims or known abuse
Issues.
Incidents. Yeah, and we have an equal number between Mount Diablo and San Francisco, none that are known in the Alameda Council at this time. No open litigation, so we are dealing with that. I want you to know a little bit about what the combined council looks like. Alameda is a very small council, about under 1,000 youth served. Mount Diablo and San Francisco are both serving in the mid 9,000s. So when we come together, we'll be a council of nearly 20,000 youth. One of the things that we're going to, I think, be able to help with Mount Diablo and Alameda is dealing with some of our scout reach out, and we've tended to call it, instead of scout reach, we call it direct support, where we reach into the community that is not well served by families. We're going to have an available youth total of about 550,000 young people. We'll have over 7,000 adult leaders. 7,000 adult leaders. Over 400 charter partners, 120 languages, and a budget of nearly, $8 million a year that we've been able to raise through our combined councils. That is not the reason to merge. The reason to merge is we think we can leverage the competencies of each of the councils. We do really wonderful job at events to raise funds for our program. We do a really wonderful job with program, with camp operations. Mount Diablo, for example, and Alameda both do a wonderful job with fundraising through the Friends of Scouting program, for example. And they have access to different sets of donors that we can work with to make sure the resources are here for the youth. But one key point is that we know, without talking about the possibilities, but rather the fact of direct savings in our annual budget. That's because we're going to be able to go from 3 scout executives to 1. We're going to go from 3 audit committees, or audits, if you will, to 1. We're going to go from 3 national service fees to 1. Let's see, what was the other one? And then we're also going to, directors and officers insurance, the same, go from 3 to 1. Those things are not really dependent on council size. Even though we're going to more than double, those costs don't go up.
Correct.
So we're going to save right off the bat over $500,000 a year that we can put into program and unit service that right now the 3 councils are sending offshore. So it's really, from a resource standpoint, we leverage the work of the overlying council and get it back down into the units. Our intent, we have currently 13 districts between San Francisco, Mount Diablo, and we have 1 in the Alameda Council. When we start, we'll have 14 districts, and we have no intention of changing that. It will stay 14 districts for the foreseeable future. Things change, but 14 districts. We're going to need DEs. We're going to be able to leverage volunteer assistance in those. We'll probably have 2 wood badges instead of 1 and other things to make it easier for our adult leaders to get trained. The goal here is not to cut. We'll get rid of things that are truly redundant, but we're not doing this with an eye toward cutting expenses on the staff and on the support side of this. What we're looking to do is cut expenses that are not adding value to the process. You want to comment on that a bit?
I think that's great. It is important, the dollar amount that the combined councils can save. I do appreciate what Dan said, that that's not a driving reason, or certainly the main reason, that the councils are even considering a merger. There are a number of different synergies involved. The employees of all 3 councils, the biggest expenses on an employee side is easily, hands down, going to be the scout executive. Well, as a matter of fact, my choice to retire, not resign, my choice to retire on March 31st is aiding and abetting this process. To put it bluntly, I don't have a dog in the fight one way or the other. I'm not looking to come out as a winning scout executive or to become a succeeding scout executive in the combined council. So the salaries that are paid to me and the benefits that are paid to me will be a part of the savings that Dan has spoken of. Currently, Alameda has a vacancy for their scout executive position. So it makes good sense to have this conversation on just the basis of these two open positions. And honestly, the biggest part of that over $500,000 in savings will come, a big part will come from these two positions that will no longer need to be funded. And I appreciate, Dan, what you said, that those savings can actually be turned around and put right back into program and to unit serving, youth serving, our volunteer serving executives, serving each district. So, thank you.
Okay, good, thank you. So we'll start to address some questions. If you want to make comments in your chat box, Tricia will be able to review those. The first question we've got is, will the districts currently under the three councils remain the same? I think I addressed that. Will the district staff remain the
Territories,
same?
you mean does the questioner mean the personnel or the
I believe they mean both.
Okay.
Both.
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe they mean both. So the geography will remain the same. The personnel may change, but not the level of service. The level of service should be going up as we go through this. The whole point of this strategic move is to give better service on the unit level. So we expect that there will be district executives serving in the same way they have been. Let's see here. Will the PAIA continue in the new merged council? You know, as I said, we are intentionally not making decisions going into the merger that don't need to be made. That is one that does not need to be made. So right now, San Francisco is assessing that fee. Mount Diablo and Alameda do not. We'll look at those things going forward. I don't know what the answer will be. I do believe that San Francisco next year, at the most, would be the equivalent to the annual registration fee. So we would expect it to go down next year. So if there is a PAI, it would be for everyone in the Golden Gate Area Council, not selected by geography. Do you want to?
No, I think that's a fine answer. I do suspect, though, that the answer with any kind of local assessment would be somewhere between no fee at all and currently what we're charging now as a San Francisco Bay Area Council. Certainly less than what is being charged now, but it's going to be up to the new board and the new executive committees to come to those decisions about what needs to be the right formula for the new larger council.
And remember, the board will be the combination of all three boards. So everybody will have a good review. The next two questions are very similar. One is, will they get into the finances of each council and which councils are operating in the black? In 2019, all three councils had a negative net agency gain, or a negative profit, if you will. So the losses in Alameda and in Mount Diablo were considerably less than what we experienced here in San Francisco. But again, we're going to be freeing up resources to allow us to wipe that out and move forward. We do not intend to do a deeper dive into the individual council finances. We did look at them in the merger committee on enough depth to assure ourselves that there were no surprises in the finances looking back over 5 years and looking forward over 2. So I think that's where we stand on that. Has there been any discussion about the future of NYLT courses? Yes, and that discussion was the same as so many other things with the merger. We'll decide that as to what's best for the Golden Gate Area Council once the council is formed. We certainly intend to be having NYLT, what it'll look like, where it happens, how many courses, who will run it, all of those things are in the air. I can tell you that short term, what we've got in our pipeline is gonna continue, as will the other councils. So we're not going to be cutting down things that we've already prepared for.
That's exactly right. If I could add, Dan, one of the reasons that the merger discussions back in 2011 and 2012 took so long, I believe, Dan, 16 months,
16.
is because we spent a great deal of time up front discussing all of these questions, NYLT, Wood Badge, the various programs, camps, and we tried to resolve all the known problems or the anticipated problems up front. And it created, it just dragged the entire process down. This time around, what, as Dan has mentioned, what the merger committees have done is they've assured themselves that this makes sense for the young people we serve. They'll get more scouting for less buck, less dollars. We're not putting off these decisions. We're still going to have to go through them and have them be resolved at some point in the future. But that's after the merger decision is made. If it's a yes, then we will have to go through these questions about how many NYLT courses, where will they be, how many Wood Badge courses, and so forth. But the best people to deal with the answers to those questions are those involved in NYLT and in Wood Badge. And the groups who are involved in those courses from each council will come together and they'll decide then what's best for the Golden Gate Area Council. It won't hinge upon whether we will or will not merge, because we'll be merged at that point. We'll be consolidated. So I just wanted to add a little emphasis to that point. These decisions will have to be discussed and they'll have to be made, but the bigger decision right now is, should we merge or should we not merge?
Perfect, thank you. Let me expand on that a little bit, because if it hasn't come up yet, but it's going to, and that is, what about the OA? The OA is a perfect example of something that goes sideways in almost every merger I've ever heard of. If we merge, the day after the merger, we will have 3 lodges, 3 chiefs, 3 secretaries of the lodge, on and on. Nothing will change. Over the course of the next months, year, it could take up to a year, we will merge into a single lodge. But we'll do it in a way that minimizes the disruption to the leadership of the current lodges and allows the new lodge to come together and be even stronger than they are today. So that process will happen. The national organization is giving us a year to get that done, and I think we've got the leadership to do it.
The point is, it hasn't been pre-decided what's going to happen with the 3 lodges. They're going to come together on their own terms and do some cultural things and do some growing things together. And at the end of the day, it'll be a stronger single lodge than the 3 separate lodges now.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to try and go through these a little faster. Voting members of Mount Diablo rejected the merger already, and that was in 2012. What has changed to make their executive committee think it will pass this time? It is a very good question, and the reason for the failure last time is complicated at best. I think this time we're keeping our focus on the strategy and what's best for kids. And that's resonating with our board, with their board, and with their volunteers. That if we spend a lot of time worrying about who's going to get this committee position, we lose the whole point of the merger. And so the executive committee and the board over in Mount Diablo is doing the same thing we're doing, as is Alameda. We're focused on the strategy and taking care of kids. So I think that it's got a very, very high likelihood of support. It did pass unanimously with their executive committee and in both cases, both the other councils as well as ours.
And Dan, let me add, since 2011 and 2012, when the first decision to merge failed, a lot's happened since then. The economy has gotten much more difficult to maneuver around as individual councils. As a combined council, we'll have much more strength to be able to handle some of the issues that we face today. And to be honest, the political landscape has changed a little bit. The councils are run by different leaders, and they're more pro-merger than they were last time around.
Yep, very good. Let's see. What will happen to the East Bay Scout store and our YLTC? It's going to be here and operating. I can't say that's going to be true in 2050, but right now, in the foreseeable future, the expectation is it will be here and working for kids. Will we be able to keep our Scout building? Same question. The other councils, the question is about the PAIA and how other councils collect their funds. As I mentioned earlier, Mount Diablo does a really great job with their Friends of Scouting to fund it. They also run some special events, but we do really great job of special events in San Francisco. The Alameda Council has some key donors who help them, as well as a Friends of Scouting program. So it's a real mix, and one of the things that we think is good about the blending of the competencies of these councils is we can help really build the special event projects. Mount Diablo can come in and really help us with Friends of Scouting and community outreach. So that's how we're handling that. Let's see here. When it gets around to possibly selling properties, will the economics, demographics of the Scouts and their ability or lack thereof to travel to Scout buildings play a role in those decisions? I would assume a lot of things are going to play a role in those decisions. The real bottom line, as we've mentioned, is just how do we best serve the Scouts, and in order to do that, we have to be able to service the unit committees and unit leadership through these buildings. Budget projection for the new combined council. Annual income, about $8.2 million. Annual expenses, about $8.2 million, right? We know right off the top, we're gonna save over $500,000 on things like Scout executives and audit fees. That money will go right back into program. So we don't expect that we're going to just, not spend the cash. We'll start to build up a reserve. All three councils have run down the reserves. So we will be putting some of that into reserves so that we can weather a bad year. But the intent is to continue on at about 8.2 million and then figure out how to grow it. Please elaborate on the status of the ships. I'm sorry, is this the Sea Scout ships? Is that the question? It's from Flory. Is there more details?
Nope, that's it.
Flory, if you would restate your question, I'll try to deal with that. Devil's advocate. What's the argument against the merger? The argument against the merger is really quite simple. We think we're better than you and we're going to stay on our own. San Francisco believes that, Mount Diablo believes that, Alameda believes that. The merger committee and the executive committees believe that together we're going to be even better than that. So the argument against the merger really has been one of, do we risk our own council's viability and program through a merger, individually? I feel very strongly that we're stronger, Mount Diablo's stronger, Alameda's stronger when we come together. And interestingly, Alameda hadn't ever even considered a merger until a couple of weeks ago. They've already gotten to the point where they see this is going to be good for their Scouts, and they're promoting it. So again, they run a great program. They think they're going to be able to do even better through the merger.
Dan, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't agree more. I think that if you were to stand back a few feet and just take every question or every concern against a merger at just face value, and you really looked at what that concern was, I think, and I can't guarantee everyone would flow this way, but I think that you would find that that reason against the merger is an adult issue. It's who's going to be the chairman, or I can't make the meeting if it's going to be over there. Oh, that's a different day. I can't do that. Those are adult issues. But if you were also to take that same question or the reasons for the merger, that right now, the way it's been developed over the last month, month and a half, is that strictly about young people. We're doing this or recommending this strongly, I might add, to benefit young people and getting the most out of scouting that they possibly can. Again, if there's a reason not to merge, or it's being brought up not to merge, or if you see a Facebook post that it says we shouldn't do this because, think about that because, and I'll bet you'll find that that's an adult issue, and that 6-year-old Cub Scout or Tiger Cub or 8-year-old Cub Scout, they could probably care less about that particular reason. So,
Very well said, very well said, thank you. The next question is, what about the Piedmont Council? Well, the Piedmont Council, as you know, is surrounded by San Francisco Council. They run an outstanding program. They have donors that are willing to fund very specific Piedmont program, and they're doing great. So there's no reason to break them, right? They're doing a wonderful job. Someday, I suspect they'll come knocking on our door, but at this point, they're doing a wonderful job, and there's no reason to bring them in. When will the council merger be finalized? That's in the air, unfortunately.
good question.
We have a scheduled all members vote on the 31st. So that's when the CORs, the boards, the national reps, and the members at large would cast their vote on whether or not to accept the resolution of merger. Coronavirus has hit us, right? We're under an order from the health department. So we're going to be cautious about how we proceed on that. We may still be able to do the actual vote on the 31st. We may need to delay it so that we can include all of the potential voters in the process. We're working with the national legal staff. We're working with our own legal people, particularly Rick Koff and Doug Farmer. So we'll have to get back to you on the actual date. Once we decide to merge, the next morning, two things are going to happen. One is we're going to start functioning as the merged council, but what that means is everybody's going to come back into their same desk, their same job, and get the work done and execute on the plans that we've got in place. And it will be a slow transition point driven by mostly the volunteers being at a point where they can make those decisions.
I believe earlier today, Dan, at a board meeting, you mentioned that if we do vote on the 31st of March and the vote is yes, overwhelmingly, let's merge these three councils, then I believe all the legal aspects we're shooting for May 1. Is that what you said?
May 1 is our objective, to be legally formed as a new corporation. Let's see. Our new council boundaries will enjoy some of the richest companies in the United States. How will our fundraising change to take advantage of these companies? That's a really good question. We don't know the answer. We're going to have a lot of good people working on it. We have not addressed that issue. What we do know from a strategic level is that many of our donors have told us, wait a minute, you guys were just here and asked us for a donation. No, that was the other council.
Right.
We're going to be able to go in with a unified voice now. And so we think that's going to be easier, not only to go through the fundraising, but also to explain to them why they might want to be more generous and help this larger organization.
And Dan, this also addresses one of the issues and concerns that we've had for years. Men and women work in one council but may live in another council, and where they live is typically where their children join scouting. And so this combination, the East Bay and the West Bay, so to speak, San Francisco, this resolves some of those difficulties in raising money. And again, the synergies involved here, in my mind, it's clearly 1 + 1 = 3 or 4 or more.
Good. The next question says, if 8.2 million is both the income and expense, well, that's the point, then that suggests the combined loss of the three councils is about 500,000. No, I think you may recall what I said was those resources that get freed up by getting rid of 2 Scott executives and 2 audits and 2 of this and 2 of that are going to be able to be put back into the program. All 3 councils have been struggling to stretch resources to make sure that the program's still delivered. We're going to be able to increase the program delivery throughout the Golden Gate Area Council to the tune of not really 500,000. I want to make sure you're clear on that. Some of that's going to go to building a small reserve back that we have depleted over the last few years. But the only reason expenses are going to go up is because we're going to move monies that we save into program. Let's see. Someone suggests that large donors to Alameda be talked to get their views. What if they were against the merger and it put those funds at risk? I can assure you that the leadership in Alameda has been doing that. I had the opportunity to attend their town hall last week. It seemed like a month ago, but it was last week. And they had the major donors in the room, along with the CORs and other stakeholders. And my sense from their questions and their comments was that they're disappointed that the identity of the Alameda Council might be going away. Some of the independence of the Alameda Council might be going away. But they were excited to know that it will have a district identity. And they saw that as the world continues to change, they just can't fund the operations of a standalone council in Alameda. So this is a great opportunity for them to become full partners with the other 13 districts. You know, there'll be a 14th district. So I can assure you that the Alameda leadership is very worried about the same thing and have gotten good feedback from their donors. For the final merger vote, is it 50% plus to pass, or does it require a higher percentage? It does require 50% plus 1 of the ballots cast. So we do need to form a quorum. So that means that we need to have a number of votes that match, I think it's 5% of the total voting
That's
membership.
right.
That many people will need to cast a vote. Of however many ballots are cast, 50% plus 1 must be in favor for it to pass.
Ideally, to give that a little bit more explanation, ideally, on the evening of the 31st, we'd simply communicate, and invitations have gone to attend this meeting. It technically may not be a meeting, but chartered organization representatives and our board, etc., have all been invited and been given notice of this meeting on the 31st. We'd probably just open up a window of time, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. During that time, a ballot or a voting card can be cast and then put into the voting box. We would establish quorum at the beginning of that hour at 7, between 7 and 7:15. We'd count the voting members who are in attendance, establish quorum, and then we're legally allowed then to accept voting cards and accept votes that are cast that evening.
Okay, yes, and we are working closely with National to make sure that in this environment with the coronavirus that we can stay within our bylaws for each of the 3 councils, within the California State Corporation Code, and still protect all the voting members.
Which is to say, Dan, that there may not be actually a physical meeting
Correct.
that evening. We're working out the technicalities of how we can legally do that. But wouldn't it be wonderful as a voter You could learn all that you needed to learn about this process, about what's going to happen, and then simply cast your ballot from your home or from your work if you're allowed to go into work.
Right, so stay tuned, be patient with us, we're gonna work that out. Again, probably one of the things that we need to maintain sensitivity to is the coronavirus has made it a little more difficult to execute all of the education plans that our individual councils have. So we wanna make sure that everybody in all three councils have a chance to get their questions answered. And I just lost my questions, here we go. Okay, here we go. How will the executive committees be reformed? Simple. It's a combination of the three executive committees. Same goes for the board. The one thing that is different is we will not have, there are 4 statutory offices within the organization. Those 4 have been processed through a nominating committee process, and you would have them on your ballot to choose the president, the treasurer, and the council commissioner. Similarly, there is a Scout Executive Selection Committee that has been formed representing all 3 of the potential merged councils, and they intend to be doing their work over the next week or so and be able to tell you who the Scout Executive would be in the event of a successful merger. Let's see.
You actually handled that last question about how will the boards or the executive committees reform themselves a lot differently from the way I would have answered it, Dan. I would have said, we don't know yet. Certainly all of the members of each of the 3 councils' boards will be invited to be a part of the brand new board. The only reason they would not be on the board is if they elected or self-elected to step aside or step down. But as Dan has mentioned a few times, as the months go by and they work together and try to evolve into the proper meeting time and the meeting date, many of the board members will find that they need telephonic capability to be a part of those board meetings and so on and so forth. So there'll be an evolution and a growth, but it'll all resolve itself over time.
Good. Oh, here we've got a couple more questions. How large or how many more members will be in the board? As we start, the total number of board members, if you add up Alameda, Mount Diablo, and San Francisco, will be the same as far as being invited to Ken's point, as far as being invited to join that board. Some may choose, as happens regularly throughout the year, individual board members, for whatever changes in their circumstances, say, you know, I can't continue to serve in the way I want to on the board and be productive, so I will be stepping away from the board. This is a point in time, an inflection point in time where we may see a larger number of folks do that, but they'll all be invited. What happens should 2 or even 3 units have the same unit number?
That's a good question.
I'm gonna let my chauffeur answer that one.
Troop 101A, Troop 101B, and C. You know, Dan, actually, I'm not certain what the answer may be on that one, but that's something that will easily be resolved, I think, over time. I do believe that at the individual unit level, they will be able to keep their own identity. In fact, I'm getting nods from our technical experts in the back. If there is a unit, a Troop 101 or a Scouts BSA Troop 101 in all 3 councils, they're all going to continue to be Scouts BSA Troop 101.
Yeah, and what has been done in other mergers that I've been involved in is a 4th digit is added to most of the unit numbers. They may or may not put it on their uniform, but one of the 101s becomes 2 101, another becomes 4 101, and another becomes 7 101. Just so we can keep track of them internally, what they have on their sleeve may continue to be just the 3.
One thing that today, in today's world, we all should perhaps remember is that both Mount Diablo and San Francisco are the products of mergers. San Francisco Bay Area Council years ago was the Oakland Council and the San Francisco Council. It became the San Francisco Bay Area Council. So we've done this before, and there is a solution to most all of these questions.
I actually was in a council that had multiple units with the same number, and it really was not an issue. Have we got any other questions? Please go ahead and keep sending them in through the chat. I think I'm about to get one here. Bear with us. Here we go. Other than the costs of getting new unit flags, are you expecting any additional cost to the unit with the merger? That's an interesting thought. I hadn't considered flags. I can't think of any others. Can you?
Well, there might be, at some point there'll be a new shoulder strip. For those who are members of the Order of the Arrow, there'll be a new flap. What they'll look like, we have no clue at this point, but it'll be kind of fun coming up with something brand new and different. And if we do merge March 31st or some day after, think about the shoulder strips that you currently have. They will become collector's items. There might be a run on them, and you should buy as many as you can now. Huh?
Okay, any other questions coming in?
No.
Okay, since we're not seeing any more questions, I think we'll wrap up tonight. We've been almost an hour. I really appreciate everyone signing in and monitoring this. Please continue to send your questions. We appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to being a part of the Golden Gate Area Council very, very soon. Thank you all.
Good night.